Hello, and welcome to End of the Line, the Women of Standing Rock post film conversation. This conversation is a special program between Sif Streams and Annisfield Wolf Book Awards as part of the 2021 Cleveland Book Week presented by the Cleveland Foundation. My name is Eric Seiler. I'm a professor of film, media arts, and communications, as well as moderator for this conversation. I'm very pleased to be joined by two very special guests. First of all, we had the director of the film, Shannon Crane. Shannon is an Emmy winning producer and humanitarian whose work has been presented by dozens of governments, institutions, including the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, the Smithsonian Institute of the American Indian, NASA, MIT, the British Museum, and UNESCO. Shannon's first feature documentary in 2012, The Beginning, which examines the sacred Mayan text, was the most watched of 1,600 programs at the MIP Docs, and it aired on 20 plus TV networks worldwide and was the official selection at nearly 100 film festivals. In 2016, she came from Honduras and began production of her feature documentary, End of the Line, The Women of Standing Rock. Hello, Shannon, and welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, it's great that you're here. Next, we have a subject from the film, Pearl Daniel Means. You probably recognize her, but she is a producer on the film, and she's an activist and author who speaks around the world on matters concerning Indigenous issues, human rights, and environmentalism. She was born into the Ashini clan of the Navajo Nation. Pearl walked alongside her late American Indian activist, author, artist, and actor Russell Means as his wife, business manager, and collaborator. She is still involved with Treaty, which stands for the Tola Immersion Educational Foundation Fund for this which is the film's financial sponsor. So, hello, Pearl, and welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Well, it's good to have you both here. This is such a powerful and impactful film. And I'll start with you, Shannon. You were in Honduras at the time, and I understand you were getting footage sent by your parents on this, what was going on and what was going on back here in the U.S. And just came here. So why did you just decide to come here, just basically on a whim? What drew you to this?
I really felt like I had to. I was covering similar stories in Honduras, where I was living and working at the time. And these issues of Indigenous land rights sadly happen all over the world. But what really struck me was Amy Goodman's Footage for Democracy Now, seeing that that same type of violence and intimidation tactic that has been used elsewhere was happening right in North Dakota. And so I just felt very strongly that I needed to go to Standing Rock. And Pearl was the first person I reached out to. I knew she would be going, and sure enough, she was planning on it.
Now, Pearl, did you know Shannon ahead of time? Can you talk a little bit about how you developed a relationship with her to actually help produce this documentary?
Certainly. Shannon reached out to us probably in 2011, late 2011, 2012-ish. And she was doing a project at that time, and she was interviewing impactful leaders around the world. I believe it was the Indigenous world. And she reached out to schedule an interview with my late husband, Russell Means. And so he agreed to the interview. And she came out we were actually in Durango, Colorado at the buffalo harvest there at the college. I'm forgetting at the moment the name of the college, but anyway, Shannon joined us and she did an interview and we stayed in touch and actually became friends after that.
All right. Well, great. And you were in New Mexico. I'm sorry, you were in North Dakota at the time when the uprising. I shouldn't say uprising, when they started, uh, trying to protest against the pipeline. And Shannon saw the documentary footage and reached out to you because she knew that you were there at the time.
No, no, actually, Russell was from the Pine Ridge Sioux Indian Reservation, and we had a ranch there and spent part of the year there. But I'm Danae from New Mexico, and I was here. It was the summer of 2016 when she called me, and it's an interesting kind of a backstory to the magic of all of this that I'm compelled to share in order to get to appreciate the full picture. Um, it was about this time of the day, and I walked out of my home into my office, and I remember the sky was blue. We have these beautiful turquoise blue skies that filmmakers love, and artists as well, photographers, etc. And I came into my office, I sat down right where I'm sitting today, and I started working. And out of nowhere, about 20 minutes later, I felt, and first I felt it, it was an electrical surge that hit right in my midsection and just propelled me out of my chair. And I remember I screamed, and then I heard the lightning. And so I immediately checked to make certain I was okay. My fingers, my feet, everything seemed to be working properly. I walked outside, and at that moment, there was just a very strong smell of sulfur and like burning electrical wires. So I made a quick assessment and walked around to make certain that nothing was burning. And I went and got water, and I just kept walking, thinking, I've been hit by lightning, but I'm okay. So I kind of sat with that and pondered it for the day. The next day, Shannon calls, and she had a unique experience as well that was kind of happening simultaneously with this electrical surge I went through. And I'll let her share that. But she asked me, "Are you going to Standing Rock?" And I said, "Yes, I am." I said, "I've been planning every week to go, and then things keep coming up." And I said, I think Russell Means shocked me out out of my chair in my office here to get my attention. And I told her what had happened. And I said, so I'm leaving on Saturday. And then she joined me there on Monday, and we started setting up interviews, and the rest is history.
Well, it certainly is. And this Shannon, that's great that you had a partner there, but you're showing up. And I'm just gonna just put this out there. I know you're originally from Wisconsin. You grew up in a white community, and you're showing up in a Native American area, and you do have Pearl at your side. But how did you gain the trust of the Native Americans to actually start filming?
As you mentioned, Pearl being by my side certainly helped. They love Pearl as one of their own there at Standing Rock. And knowing that I was connected to the late Russell Means as well, I think really helped things. And I've worked with Indigenous people actually now all over the world, I think in about 70 countries now. I've been really blessed to conduct a lot of fascinating interviews. And you have to earn the trust. You have to show up in the right way, in a good way. And that's actually one of my major beefs with the documentary world and with a lot of documentary filmmakers who don't even bother learning a greeting, much less coming to the lands in a respectful manner. And so trust was certainly something that needed to be earned. and needed to be earned again and again and again and maintained. And it understandably took some time because these are people who have been made so many promises that have all been broken for the past 525 plus years by people who look like me. And so I always feel somehow good about when I face any sort of resistance when I show up in places like this, because I think, you should be really skeptical based on history, and not just history, but present day activities that are happening around the world.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about the documentary itself. Uh, when did you decide to stop filming and edit and say this is it? Because this is an ongoing story; it's still going on now. And and the other question I have for you is, you decided to mix in some history there too. You talk about, the boarding schools and the, drug and alcohol and foster care and so abuses and so forth. So you decided to do that, make almost like a parallel historical piece along with what's going on now. Talk a little bit about that, and also how you decided just to say, okay, I'm going to edit now and put it out there.
So for Pearl and me and the rest of our team, it was really important to give the historical context. This wasn't just about one pipeline and about injustices that occurred in 2016 and 2017. This is an ongoing issue, and Pearl can certainly speak better to that than I about all that she's been involved with actions around the world. But this is an ongoing issue. And I think for the majority of people who come from white Western society do not understand that this is something that not only has happened historically, but is still happening. As was shown in the film, most of these women attended boarding schools at which they were abused and witnessed absolutely horrific things. The foster care abuses, there was a child taken out of the home while we were filming in a really bad way and didn't need to happen, and on, the medical system, etc. It was really important for us to give that historic context. And, I've heard from people, oh, it's really hard watching that. It's really tough seeing that. Yeah, it's tough. Try living it.
Yeah, try. Yeah, exactly. I can't imagine living it. But what about the story itself? When did you decide? Okay, I think I have enough. Let me move ahead and actually cut this piece and try to get it distributed.
We have more than enough footage to make a wonderful documentary series of fantastic footage that ended up on the cutting room floor. For this documentary, we had anywhere from 90 minutes to just 42 minutes, depending on the broadcaster, to tell this story. And it was important to me that we document especially the elders and historic happenings that were occurring at that time, because I knew it could be used for a later purpose. And so we did not turn off the cameras until I believe it was August of 2018. So or maybe it was even after that. But we followed these women for about 2.5 years, and you never want to stop. I would still be following them around every day if I could. Really, it's just a matter of budgets, because people like Pearl and Phyllis Young, Washtewi Young, the characters at the core of this story, they are doing amazing things every day. And it's heartbreaking to have to edit out content. It's the worst part of my job, actually.
It is. It's tough to make some these decisions, but you made some great decisions to turn out a wonderful piece.
Thank you.
Over to you, Pearl. The women. There was a lot of strength with the women there. Can you give us a little bit of background or context about how women have taken leadership roles in this, and also where do the men stand in terms of being activists as well?
Thank you for that question. It's probably one of the driving forces of our culture is the fact that 98% of us as Indigenous peoples are matrilineal. It's not the flip side of the coin to patriarchy. It's the societies based on balance. And in order to have balance, we embrace our differences and our strengths. So we do have gender roles in our societies. And what the invader didn't know, and I believe is one of the reasons that we're still here, granted we're about 1% of what we were in America at the time that the Europeans landed lost on our shores, is that these societies that were built on balance and equality enabled us to not just survive, but thrive. And as the conquistadors, in their journals, they wrote that America, this land, was a paradise. And that was indicative of how our societies were structured. And more specifically, our relatives to the east, the Iroquois Nation, they influenced their Great Law of Peace was a document that was their political social structure. And the forefathers of the Americans utilized a great deal of that 1/3 of that document is what became the United States Constitution, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights. So, and these women, it was the older women after menopause that were very, very powerful, highly revealed, and they placed and removed our headsmen, our leaders. So we didn't have just one chief, as the invader likes to portray us in his story. There are multiple headsmen that oversee the well-being of the society. Our men are our defenders. And it was true. It's still true today. You go throughout Indian country because our men have been targeted. And you know, during the American Indian movement, that Russell Means was a part of the leadership. He said often, very publicly, they were given direction from the older women. They said, where are our defenders? At the time of Wounded Knee, 1973, they put out a call and they said, where are our defenders? And the American Indian movement came to the table, and the rest is history. But as you go throughout Indian country today, you will find that women are the ones that are getting higher educations. They're in the workforce. We're raising families. We're doing that to survive and to continue. So our men have been targeted heavily, and that was all part of the psychological impact of trying to destabilize and eliminate a group of people.
Well, we appreciate that that answer and that bit of history as well too. Thank you for that. Shannon, and to piggyback on that, Shannon, I know at one point in the documentary you showed, I believe it's in Kala, she gave birth, you know, near the surrounding a protest, and she had a girl. So it just worked out fittingly that, you know, another woman, a girl, a female was born to even aid to the documentary. But you said a moment ago, you know, you had to make tough decisions on what to put in the film and what not to put in the film. If you had a little bit more time, just tell us one scene or one interview that you wish you could have put in the film that we did not see.
Lula Red Cloud, the elder from Pine Ridge. I conducted a number of interviews with her at Standing Rock, in her home, and elsewhere, including in Helsinki, Finland. The first time she's ever left her lands to come to Finland, where we were doing post-production on the film. She was just outstanding and had so much beautiful content to share. Actually, in her case, it's not that it didn't fit in the film so much as I feel as if it's a standalone project. And so that's one of my goals for next year, is to actually release that, because she spoke about so much past Standing Rock, that I just feel like it's almost a teaching tool for younger women of all backgrounds. And so that's something that will definitely see the light of day.
Well, we look forward to that as well. Was there any, was there a point at when you were actually filming that you had to question yourself, what am I doing here? After you've seen footage of some of the violence that took place, there were lots of challenges with this, trying to gain the trust of the Native Americans. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I never questioned it while I was in it. It was after we were done that I thought, wow, we could have actually gotten hurt. We certainly got a lot of threats, and our team was interrogated a couple of times, and it was a crazy situation, but I don't question it. I go on some sort of strange autopilot when I'm working on projects like this, where I do really dumb things like jump out of a moving car, or, face a guy who's got a gun pointed at me in Latin America, that sort of thing. I'm so focused on getting the story that I leave myself. And I think that that's really important, actually, because I don't want to put my own imprint on the project. I think it's probably impossible to not somewhat, but I didn't want it to be about me or my struggles. Really, the biggest struggles that we had as filmmakers behind this was getting the belief of broadcasters, of Hollywood, and finding the money for a project that was about women. And so that's nothing compared to what the women themselves were facing and continue to face.
Right. Yeah, you certainly were brave. And I think I listened somewhere or read somewhere that you didn't lose any footage at all, which is great. I know, people had their footage confiscated and so forth, but you didn't lose any footage.
We actually ended up with other people's footage as well. We had received, my director of photography and me, we received a call one day from a gentleman who said that he wanted to give us his body cam footage. He was an officer, police officer, and said, I can't sleep ever since Standing Rock. I feel awful about what's happened, and I trust you with my footage. And he sent the footage, and part of that footage was confiscated footage from other filmmakers. And so I was able to return some of their footage. For instance, drone footage, when drones were shot down by law enforcement. I ended up with a lot of that footage and some other footage as well, including some personal documents of another filmmaker. There was a lot of shady things going on there, but Pearl and I knew to expect it, and we took every precaution out in the field.
Well, again, so brave, so brave. And you are too, Pearl, as well, too, for, for what you stand for and for working alongside Shannon. Pearl, can you give us an update of what's going on now in terms of how the women of Standing Rock, how they are doing and what they are doing to try to things surrounding the pipeline?
Well, the struggle continues, and we, typically, no surprise, any American Indian issue becomes a political football, and it's bounced around in the court systems. And we've had some wins, and then we're still dealing with the bottom line, the fact that Dakota Access Pipeline, they're continuing the operation, yet they have never produced an environmental impact statement. That's a direct violation. And so we continue to battle with that. And in the meantime, as recent as earlier this month, late last month, August, early September, there were two water protectors that were arrested. And I believe their names are Ruby Montoya and Jessica. And they were prosecuted as terrorists. These are water protectors. So, you know, the legal issues continue. And I also sit on the board of the Romero Institute. And one of the projects of the Romero Institute is the Lakota People's Law Project. And that's a really good website. They have social media that you can get updates as to what's taking place in respect to not only Dakota Access, but also what's taking place in Minnesota with the Enbridge on the Anishinaabe homeland and the whole tar sands, black snake that is affecting all of us. So yes, it's an ongoing battle.
It is. It is, and I just wish you and the Women of Standing Rock and all the people who are supportive of this issue, all the best with this, because persistence hopefully will bring about change. And in our last few moments here, a couple more questions for you. One is, this is to the both of you. I'll start with you, Phyllis, and go to Shannon. What's the one thing you want people to walk away with from this documentary after seeing it? How do you want people to respond to this documentary?
Well, it is an educational tool, and that's something Russell often said.
Mhm.
The our weapon of the 21st century is the camera, and that we need to get involved with telling our stories. So this is exactly what we did. And, it's, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. The question again?
About what do you want people to take away from this documentary?
Oh, absolutely. I want people to understand, to get a feeling, a glimpse, a very small glimpse of who we are as a people and the struggles and challenges that we've had to deal with and overcome. And at the end of the day, all we're asking for are to be respected, a people that wants to be respected. The United States government has not lived up to its treaty obligations that they signed. These were peace treaties from the late 1800s. They were violated immediately. And the American Indian movement, they were a vanguard for us to bring to the forefront these injustices. And the fact that we're living in poverty within our own homelands, and we're being labeled as terrorists because we are protecting water. Water is life. We all need water, all of our relatives. This isn't just about indigenous peoples. This is humanity, the four-leggeds, the winged, the water. We all need and depend on water. So this is a very big call out to humanity, that we have a responsibility to stand up and protect our grandmother, the earth. And this film highlights that and much more as to the the struggles and the philosophy of the American Indian, and the richness and the beauty and the strength.
Thank you for the answer. What about you, Shannon? What should people take away from this film?
Everything that Pearl just said. As well, I would love to see white and particularly men. I would love to see them feel something. And I say men just because this is still largely a man's world in corporate America, and they are making decisions on a daily basis that impact Indigenous peoples and lands the world over. And I would love for them to watch this film and feel something. Actually, in that interview at or near the end of Russell Means's life, where Pearl was present, off camera, Russell had said to me, or he asked me, he said, "Are you angry?" And I said, "No." And then he said, "Are you angry?" And I said, "No." And I'm thinking to myself, do I seem angry? And then he just boomed and yelled it, "Are you angry?" And I said, "No." And he said, "That's the problem." He said, until people like you get angry and do something about these injustices, nothing is going to change. And that has hung with me really pretty much every day ever since he said that to me. It's about righteous anger, not about, misguided anger thrown, all over the place. It's about really becoming outraged over what continues to happen to Indigenous people, to Black people, to anyone outside of that elite in this country and countries like ours. I think it's going to take people, and let's say women especially, getting angry and doing what they do best, and that is looking out for the community and the greater good and the future generations. I would love for people to watch this and, yes, become very uncomfortable, and then ask, how can I help? And then specifically listen to Pearl, to Phyllis, to Washtewi, to Zinkala, to all of the women in the film, and all of their family and friends. How can they help? And listening is a great place to start.
Exactly. And I like what you said, what Russell said to you, are you angry? And I think that's a good question for everyone to ask themselves after seeing this film, because you put a lot of information out there for people to be angry in the way that you've explained it. Last question I have for the both of you. As this interview is part of the Anisfield Wolf Book Awards, and I was just wondering, is there a particular book, Shannon, first, that may have inspired you, or that you think highly of, that has maybe had an impact on your life?
I love, if I had to pick one book, I love The Soul's Code by James Hillman. It's an older book from, I believe, the 90s. Originally, it was released like 96 or something like that. And I've read it so many times. It's about calling and about how we are born with a job to do. And it looks at case studies of people, how they fulfill that life's purpose. And I think it's fascinating. I also love Dark Nights of the Soul by Thomas More. I think it's really helpful for anyone who's going through difficult times.
Very good. Very good. And what about you, Pearl? Is there a book that may have left an impression on you in your life?
Absolutely. My late husband, Russell Means's autobiography, Where White Men Fear to Tread. And in his words, it was his experience through the lens of himself and his family in a rather high profile capacity, telling the story of our beauty, our struggle, our hope in the latter part of the 20th century. And it's used today in universities. It's anyone who's interested in the Indigenous history, contemporary, in a contemporary sense. We're out of sight, out of mind. Well, this is a very valuable resource to educate what our contemporary situation is politically and socially and economically, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very valuable wealth of knowledge, and it's told in his voice. And he was a beautiful storyteller with warts and all, lots of humor, and it's a good read. Again, that's Where White Men Fear to Tread.
Thank you. Both of you made some, talked about some really excellent books there. So thank you. And I'd like to thank you both. We were joined today by Pearl Means, co-producer of End of the Line, The Women of Standing Rock, and the director, Shannon Crane. Thank you both very much for joining us, and I wish you both all the best.
Thank you.
I would like to thank our audience for joining us for this important conversation. For more information about Sif Streams plus Anisfield Wolf Book Awards, please visit clevelandfilm.org or anisfieldwolf.org. I'm Eric Seiler. Thank you.